is Jonathan Granoff, less than 0.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, friends, it is an honor to address this body which represents the majority of the world's nations. By becoming members of nuclear weapons-free zones, you have brought into action a truth which must become universally recognized soon. Nuclear weapons themselves are more of a problem than any problem they seek to address. There is presently no other political body on earth with as much legitimacy in advancing a nuclear weapons-free world as the 115 nations in nuclear weapons-free zones. The world needs you to leverage and coordinate your capacities. You represent reasoned self-interest in action and a power of success to be ignored no longer. Imagine the impact if every head of state and government represented here used their moral legitimacy to change history. This could start by stating emphatically at the general debates in the United Nations, we benefit from being one of 115 nations in nuclear weapons-free zones, and we are proud of it. It is time the entire world became a nuclear weapons-free zone. It is time to commence negotiations to ban and eliminate nuclear weapons. The world should recognize the leadership of the heads of state and government of the parties to the Treaty of Tlatelolco, who have declared their region a zone of peace. At the third summit in Costa Rica in January of 2015, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, reaffirmed its commitment, and I quote, to advance towards negotiations of a universal, legally binding instrument prohibiting the possession, development, production, acquisition, testing, stockpiling, transfer, use, and threat of use of nuclear weapons. The heads of state and government of over 30 nations further stressed, and I quote, that the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is a violation of the Charter of the United Nations, a crime against humanity, and at the same time, a violation of international law, including international humanitarian law. Crimes against humanity confer universal jurisdiction for purposes of prosecution, and that is appropriate in addressing nuclear weapons, for no other human invention can inflict such broad and horrible global destruction. The recent conferences on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons in Norway, Mexico, and Austria have made clear the morally unacceptable suffering that nuclear weapons inflict. It is commendable that the world's religious leaders are now responding, for the global law needed to rein in this technology of destruction must have a firm moral foundation. Moreover, a strong moral force is needed to overcome the inertia of the institutions that do not want to give up the perceived power the weapons confer, no matter how irrational, illegal, or immoral the weapons are. We should not ignore the importance of calls for abolition from such distinguished sources as the Nobel Peace Laureate Summits, the World Council of Churches, the World Evangelical Alliance, the most significant interfaith organizations in the world such as the United Religions Initiative, Religions for Peace, the Parliament of the World's Religions, nor leaders such as the Dalai Lama, and most recently, Pope Francis, whose insights are expressed in the Holy See's Nuclear Weapons Time for Abolition, from which I quote, "Now is the time to affirm not only the immorality of the use of nuclear weapons, but the immorality of their possession, thereby clearing the road to nuclear abolition." Nations always invoke moral propriety when they prosecute wars. Yet, when we work to build the quiet edifices of peace, built with tools such as compromise, diplomacy, law, shared goals, identified interest, our common humanity, universal values, and cooperation, we're accused of being idealists, a way of saying unrealistic. Spare us the realism that extols the virtue of relying on the threat to use nuclear weapons as a sustainable course to pursue international peace and security, believing that the weapons will never be used by mistake, miscalculation, madness, or design. Spare us the realism that rests humanity's future on the illusion of human and mechanical infallibility. Let us vigorously heed CELAC's insight, quote, the only effective guarantee against the use or threat to use nuclear weapons is their complete elimination and prohibition. We must make the currency of disarmament more valuable than the political currency of nuclear weapons brandishing. Upgrading advocacy to the highest levels of state has now become a necessity. Powerful interventions are now imperative. Any rational analysis the nuclear non-proliferation regime would indicate that the nuclear non-proliferation regime is presently in a logjam and a crisis of insufficient disarmament productivity. When the Cold War was in crisis in the 1980s, the Six Nation Initiative helped break a deadly spiral driven by the Soviet Union and the United States. Heads of state of Greece, India, Sweden, Tanzania, Mexico, and Argentina made quiet diplomatic interventions to Moscow and Washington at the highest levels to good effect. Beginning in 1984, they persisted until 1989. Practical suggestions helped move the then two superpowers toward clear progress. The need for similar effort is clear today. The issue of eliminating nuclear weapons must be addressed at the highest political level. The message has already been crafted with clarity and eloquence. This opportunity must be seized now. I have every confidence that amongst us here today are those who appreciate the gravity of the moment and have the passion and the capacity to raise advocacy up the political ladder to their highest levels of state, which is now a necessity. At every level of society, it is time to wave goodbye to nuclear weapons. Thank you very much.